Big Ten championship game is in the books. History made on a Saturday night in Indianapolis, and of course, its implications for the college football playoff here on Selection Sunday. We welcome you to Big Ten Breakdown, all a part of the I-80 Club. I am Ben Stevens. I guess we can call this the Big Ten title game post-game show, perhaps the college football playoff rankings reaction show, as it pertains to the Big Ten Conference in the three Big Ten programs that have reached the CFP. None of that, the surprising part, as it pertains to the second year of the 12-team college football playoff era. But we could also call it the bowl preview show for schools in the Big Ten Conference, and perhaps some news around the league since we last spoke entering this weekend here in December. So plenty of everything here on what we'll call, I guess, the Big Ten title game post-game show on Big Ten Breakdown. Of course, as mentioned previously, all of this in partnership with the I-80 Club. If you want the great content and coverage the I-80 Club is delivering on a daily basis, make sure you are liking, you are following, you are subscribing wherever you get your favorite shows and podcasts and audio form. It's on the feeds at Apple, Spotify, etc. I hope you are watching on YouTube and, of course, liking and following all across the socials as well. If you want all of this great content advertisement free, it's patreon.com/I80 Club. That is patreon.com/I80 Club. So things are a little bit different now. Of course, it's not a full weekend recap. We don't have 4 down honors for the 4 distinctly best things we saw from a Big Ten weekend that was. We only had 1 actual football game in the Big Ten Conference this weekend, thus the Big Ten title game post-game show here on Big Ten Breakdown. Here is how this will work. Of course, after conference championship Saturday night, quickly the focus and the intention of the college football landscape and here in the Big Ten primarily shifts to the college football playoff. What did the bracket look like? Who were the 12 teams that got into the CFP field, and all of the controversy, drama, and chaos that stems from all of that? So we'll start by looking at the college football playoff, the 3 Big Ten schools that reached the CFP, their standing, their seating, and what we can expect for that college football playoff path. We'll talk about how we reached this point. That will be the Big Ten title game recap, if you will, in the key moments on a Saturday night inside Lucas Oil in Indianapolis. And then we'll follow that with some news around the Big Ten Conference and, of course, the bowl prospectus for the Big Ten teams that will still be bowling and actually realizing an opportunity to have some postseason success, something that some other schools around various other conferences are passing up on at this time, which greatly angers me. However, we start, of course, with the college football playoff. We knew that the Big Ten championship game, 1 versus 2, the third ever 1 versus 2 matchup in the history of Big Ten football, the first ever in a Big Ten title game, would dictate how the top part of the college football playoff bracket looked. And that's exactly what we saw. Indiana crowned a Big Ten champion for the first time since 1967, the first time as an outright Big Ten title winner since 1945. And because of it, you, myself, and everybody that you know currently lives in a world where the Indiana Hoosiers, the Indiana football program, is the number 1 team in the country and the number 1 seed in the college football playoff. IU, the top overall seed in the second ever 12-team CFP here in the 2025 campaign. Indiana is 1. Ohio State is 2. The Hoosiers and the Buckeyes basically flip-flopping after the result in Indianapolis in the Big Ten title game. So despite losing in the conference championship affair, Ohio State only drops a spot. Frankly, I thought they would drop at least 2 to the number 3 seed. We'll talk about what that means for the Buckeyes and their playoff path. Still the reigning national champions in just a matter of moments. The top 4 teams were Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, champions of the SEC, Texas Tech, the champs out of the Big 12. Those 4 teams earning the opening round bye in the 2025 college football playoff. The top at-large team who will host a CFP game in just about 2 weeks, that would be this guy, the Oregon Ducks, the number 5 seed in the college football playoff, the third and final Big Ten program qualifying for the CFP. Oregon, the number 5 seed. Last year, Oregon was the number 1 overall seed. Had to face number 8 Ohio State in a precarious spot in the Rose Bowl. This time, Oregon will host a game inside Autzen Stadium. Oregon will host the number 12 seed, James Madison, JMU, to the college football playoff as the champions of the Sun Belt, a 12-1 team in JMU's head coach Bob Chesney, currently soon to become the future head coach of UCLA football. They will square off in Eugene on Saturday, December 20th. It is the nightcap of the triple header to end out that 3-part day of the college football playoff, to end out the opening round. 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Oregon will host James Madison, the 5 versus 12 matchup in the first round of the college football playoff on TNT. It is still, with all of the issues that we have for the college football playoff, my favorite part of the 12-team era. Pantheons of this sport, these majestic palaces we call college football stadiums, host playoff games on campus in one of the greatest environments in the entirety of this conference in country in college football, that being Autzen Stadium in Eugene. Will get to play host to that. Oregon booked as a 3-touchdown favorite against JMU. Of course, we will have college football playoff previews to come in the weeks that follow. So Oregon, the 5 seed, Indiana, the top overall seed, and Ohio State, the 2 seed. Indiana will head to the Rose Bowl. It is IU's first time playing in the Rose Bowl since 1968 to end out the 1967 season. The last time, of course, the Hoosiers won any share of a Big Ten title. Indiana awaits the winner of the 8-9 matchup. Oklahoma is the 8 seed. They will host number 9 Alabama. Ohio State is the number 2 seed. They will take on the winner of Texas A&M, the number 7 seed. Miami, the 10 seed, in the final at-large spot in the 2025 CFP. Ohio State will host either the Canes or the Aggies in the Cotton Bowl, a familiar setting in Dallas for Ryan Day and company. Of course, it was beating Texas in the Cotton Bowl. Jack Sawyer, we still think of you, the strip sack of Quinn Ewers that allowed Ohio State to win the college football playoff semifinal, advance to the national championship game, and of course, take down Notre Dame. That game will be on New Year's Eve. So the Friday, Ohio State, I'm actually not even sure it's a Friday, but that game will be on New Year's Eve. Ohio State, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, inside the Cotton Bowl, hosting either A&M or Miami. Texas A&M hosting Miami, of course, in the opening round at Kyle Field. The Rose Bowl in its familiar spot, up an hour, 4 p.m. Eastern time in Pasadena, as the sun sets over the San Gabriel Mountains on the very first day of a new year, January 1st, 2026. Indiana takes on either the Sooners or the Crimson Tide. An SEC team awaits Kurt Signetti and company. So now that the 12-team bracket has been unveiled, Ohio State, despite being the 2 seed and losing to Indiana in the Big Ten championship game, remains the national title favorites, but just by 20 cents. The Buckeyes plus 250 to win the national championship. Indiana backed by only those 2 dimes at plus 270. Georgia has the 3rd best number at plus 550. So a pretty good gap between the top 2 teams in the country still, but flip-flopping in order. Indiana, number 1 in the nation for the first time, of course, in program history. Oregon and Texas Tech tied for the 4th best prices at plus 850. I believe that the 4 seed in the Red Raiders, the 5 seed in the Oregon Ducks are both legitimate national championship contenders. The 6 seed is Ole Miss. Not only the departure of Lane Kiffin, I've got my questions about the Rebs, even if Lane Kiffin was there in Oxford and happy. I really do believe our national champion comes from the top 5. I believe Oregon and Texas Tech have all the right stuff to be a national championship contender. I would not be surprised, although we will get that game in the quarterfinal, if it could be a national championship game. And that will be a great one, of course, in the quarterfinal. That game will be in the Orange Bowl. Georgia will be at the site of the Sugar Bowl when we get to those stages, of course, in the CFP quarterfinals. I ran through the bracket. 1 through 12, we'll do it one more time. Indiana 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, Texas Tech 4. They earned the opening round buys. Oregon will host James Madison. Ole Miss will host Tulane. They played early in the year. The Rebs won that game by 5 touchdowns. The 7 seed is Texas A&M hosting the 10 seed in Miami. Finally, on Selection Sunday, the head-to-head victory for the Canes over the Notre Dame Fighting Irish way back in week number 1 did matter, as I expected it to. And necessity would say that it must for college football to continue in any form or fashion. It did. Number 8, Oklahoma. Number 9, Alabama. A rematch. OU went into Tuscaloosa and won that game outright just a few weeks ago. I do not necessarily have an issue with how we arrived at these top 12 teams. I would have subbed out Alabama, not because they lost by 21 points to Georgia on Saturday in the SEC championship in favor of Notre Dame, but the Crimson Tide are the only team in the 12-team college football playoff where they lost to an opponent that finished the year with a losing record. They got beat badly in Tallahassee by 2 touchdowns from a 5-7 Florida State team, only team that has a loss to an opponent that is sub 500. That, to me, was the blemish that should have been highlighted when you were deciding between 3 teams that ended the regular season with 2 losses. It is not the poor result in the conference championship game against Georgia that I thought should have pushed Alabama out. It was one part of the resume. I do believe there should be stakes for a conference championship. Ohio State, as we recognized entering Saturday's Big Ten title, would not drop far, would still earn an opening round bye. They still moved down a spot. Virginia lost in the ACC championship game to Duke in overtime. They moved down 2 spots out of the college football playoff. Heck, BYU has 2 losses this year, but to the same team. They got beat bad by 27 in the Big 12 championship game. They moved down a spot, which allowed Miami to creep up to be directly next to Notre Dame in the committee's eyes from their previous week's rankings, and thus the head-to-head carried the day. Alabama was the only loser of any of the Power Conference championship games that did not move a spot. Frankly, I thought the way the committee had pigeonholed themselves from the weekly rankings week after week and seeing either Mac Rose, the former CFP chair, or Hunter Yurachek the last few weeks put their foot in their mouth constantly, say asinine thing after asinine rationale to try to explain the issue with the rankings, they had dug themselves in a very deep hole. I did not believe ultimately that we would get either Notre Dame or Miami, or rather, let me say, I did not believe we would ultimately see both the Canes and the Irish into the college football playoff in favor of Alabama. I thought the committee was going to move Alabama from 9 to 10 after the loss to Georgia in the SEC championship game. Notre Dame up and still keeping that weird separation that for whatever reason they had said the rhetoric was that Notre Dame and Miami could not be compared based on the head-to-head result way back in week 1 because they were not jam-packed next to each other in the rankings. That's what I thought the committee was going to do. They did not even do that. And I think proving that the process that the committee now uses is highly flawed. And not just flawed where you can poke holes into the reasoning and the rationale and the explanation and the decisions that the committee makes, forcing Hunter Yurachek, the CFP chair, to go out there. I think it is not just flawed, but actively hurting this sport. Because for the entirety of the month of November, we base what we consider significant matchups. We base our implications nationally in the Big Ten Conference, elsewhere. We base what we consider significant games with stakes in games that matter on the college football playoff rankings, week in, week out, despite having issue with them. We base our expectation on that. We try to follow the rhetoric and the explanations, and it often makes us feel as though we are insane because we watch the games, we follow this sport, and yet we think of things very contradictory from the selection committee that must decide who will compete eventually for a national championship. And it is maddening. It is frustrating. It brings up anger, as you can tell in my tone. And because of that, it actively hurts the sport of college football. It lowers the significance of regular season affairs. It lessens the significance of conference championship games. If you can earn an automatic bid by being one of the 5 highest ranked conference champions, a positive of playing, competing, earning a spot, and winning a conference championship game, theoretically faltering on that stage, often in a large way, should be a hindrance as well. It lessens the significance of conference championship games. If you want to get rid of conference championship games, I would understand that as well, especially in the 12-team era, so we do not end the year on a Monday in late January. I would understand that. But all that we are getting right now in the committee selection process is anger and confusion. There is no standard protocol. There is no logistics to follow. There is no key metric that we know transparently in the public that the committee is following or using as the anchor of a team sheet or a resume comparison pool. And thus, it leaves us angry, it leaves us confused, and it actively hurts college football. That is my issue. And I think, as was put on display by the final rankings reveal on this Selection Sunday following conference championship weekend, the weekly rankings have no place in this sport. It's a made-for-TV reality-type show event. I understand it generates money. It is part of the revenue deal that comes with the college football playoff. Create different ways, creative and fun ways to cash in that 30-minute spot on a Tuesday night, because the committee delivering weekly rankings at the very end to contradict themselves when they had that head-to-head result be the key distinction the entirety of the month of November. Every single time they ranked teams 1 through 25, and to flip that when both teams were idle, even if it was the correct decision at the end, to flip that and to change that and to contradict their own words after a month of telling us something was the truth and then completely saying it was false, it makes no sense. And there is no point to it, because the only point of the weekly rankings is to further divide and confuse the college football public and even those programs that feel a certain way about where they are in the national landscape, to feel blindsided at the end. My fix: treat it like Selection Sunday for the NCAA tournament. Yes, teams are going to feel as though they are snubbed and had their bubble burst, but it's one final reveal. It's one final set of rankings. It is the 12-team college football playoff bracket, and that is it. We can argue about it, but we would not be arguing about what we had heard the weeks prior to only have it be completely contradictory at the end and making the entire experience feel rather pointless. Get rid of the weekly ranking show and do one final bracket reveal at the end of conference championship weekend, if this is going to be the system that we continue with. I am an advocate of a BCS type formula. The issue with the BCS era was not the computer model. It was not the formula itself. It was the lack of access to teams competing for a national championship. There was only 2. We've had 4, and now we have 12, with more access to compete in the playoff for a national championship derived from a computer model that would be transparent and we could all follow and understand step by step each and every way. We might disagree, but we would know why something was happening the way that it was. That would be my preferred model. Or even if you must keep a selection committee like they do for the NCAA basketball tournament that have a key metric like they do for the NCAA basketball tournament, the net wins above bubble, something that we can all rationalize and understand. Because the behind closed door meeting room in Grapevine, Texas, to put this out week after week and completely contradict themselves at the end of it all makes us feel insane and really is a pointless, worthless exercise that only leads to anger and harms this beautiful sport of college football. Harms it so much that Notre Dame doesn't want to play in a bowl game because they're going to take their ball and go home. You don't want to let us in your structure. We won't play in yours. It's a bad, bad scene. It's a bad, bad scene. Days like this make me angry, and I love college football, and we should be celebrating a college football playoff about to happen, because the games that we will have both on campus and through the other rounds is why we love this sport, the chance to earn it and decide it on the field. That is still the beauty of opening things up to the 12-team era. But everything else in this very, very changing landscape and climate of collegiate athletics feels so tough, especially on days like today. So let's get back to happier things. The top 2 teams in college football hail from the Big Ten Conference. That was the same thing we said entering conference championship weekend. It's the same thing following. And we are going to celebrate, because what we had seen on Saturday night in Indianapolis was the crowning achievement for what is the greatest story in sports the last 2 years, heck, maybe ever. Because even though it has now become expected that Indiana football, under the leadership of Curt Cignetti, is going to prove incredible things time and again. Even though those results are now expected, it should never be taken for granted, because what we are seeing and what we have seen in the last 24 months or so in Bloomington, Indiana is historic. It's remarkable. It will never be replicated again. And I don't think it ever should, or frankly, ever could. What Curt Cignetti has done for Indiana football, capped off at the pinnacle of this conference on Saturday night in their home state inside Lucas Oil, a 13-10 victory against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. That is why Indiana earns the number 1 seed in the college football playoff. So how did we get there? Indiana claiming its first Big Ten title since 1967, its first outright title since 1945, its third ever Big Ten championship in IU football history. Curt Cignetti has accomplished the first 10, 11, 12, and now 13-win season for the Hoosiers in the history of that program. The first victory for IU against Ohio State since 1988. The list of firsts, the notches that you have to have in the Indiana football record book just for the previous 2 seasons under Cignetti are going to continue. You'll need a scroll that looks like a CVS receipt. That is what he has done. How about the actual gameplay itself? It was awesome. When you have 1 versus 2, it might have not been a high-scoring affair, 42-38. We did not expect it to be because of the defensive performances that we were going to see. It was a very Big Ten championship, but it lived up to its expectation of being an awesome football game that came down to the final minutes and crucial decisions in the fourth quarter when things matter most. It was kind of a wild first half, frankly, between the Buckeyes and the Hoosiers. Both quarterbacks, both Heisman Trophy contenders, throwing costly interceptions in the first quarter. First, it was Julian Sand. Indiana takes advantage with a field goal. Then it was Fernando Mendoza. Near the end of those opening 15 minutes in Indy, Ohio State pays it off with a touchdown. We saw kickers that were often reliable. Nico Radicic missed his first field goal of the year in the second quarter. He was a perfect 14 of 14 prior to that miss from 39 yards out. The Buckeyes led 10-6 at the end of the opening half. Then on Indiana's first offensive possession of the second half, we saw beauty. We saw beauty through the air from Fernando Mendoza, having those Heisman caliber moments once again. On a 3rd and 2, a 51-yard beautiful ball over the top, over the seam to Charlie Becker, who is stormed onto the scene for the Hoosiers. A few plays later, a 17-yard touchdown toss to Elijah Surratt. That in the third quarter gave Indiana a 13-10 lead. They would never relinquish that advantage. The fact that Indiana had a second half lead against Ohio State was groundbreaking, because never had Ohio State trailed in the second half of any of their 12 regular season games, not for a single instant nor a second. And that ended up being the game-winning touchdown. Why? Because of Ohio State failing to take advantage of really good possessions offensively in the most critical part of the field. We knew the red zone was going to be vital. It's not groundbreaking football analysis. I am not coming off to you saying something that you have never heard before, that if you get inside the 20-yard line and you can see the end zone and you've got goal to go, you must score points. That's not groundbreaking, but we knew how difficult it would be to even get to that portion of the field and take advantage, because we had the 2 best red zone defenses in the sport squaring off. Believe me, Indiana had their issues of paying it off with touchdowns in the first half. They got that vital one from 17 yards out to Elijah Surratt to take the lead. But Ohio State, on the ensuing offensive possession for the Buckeyes, following Indiana taking that lead, decided to go for it. Down by 3 late in the third quarter on 4th and 1 from IU's 5-yard line. They try a quarterback sneak with Julian Sand. They ruled it a first down on the field initially. For whatever reason, and this is mind-boggling and frustrating as a fan, they reviewed it in a commercial break, and they came back on the Fox broadcast of Joel Klatt telling us they had overturned it because it was clear to see they needed to reach the 4-yard line, and Sand's knee in a massive humidity came down early. The ball did not break that 4-yard line marker. Thus, turnover on downs. Indiana able to kind of ice things away, but they had to punt it back to Ohio State. Next Ohio State drive, 15 play, 81 yards, nearly 8 minutes, but they were unable to get points. 3rd and 1 from Indiana's 9-yard line. Bootleg Julian Sayin looking for a receiver in the end zone. An incredible play by Elijah Hardy, who was making play after play for the Indiana defense all night long. The Hoosiers sacking Julian Sayin 5 times in the game. He had been sacked 6 total times in the 12 regular season games. The defense under Bryant Haynes was making play after play. So after the incompletion on 3rd-and-1 from IU's 9, they had previously gone for it on 4th-and-1. They called an interesting quarterback sneak with Julian Sayin, not handing the football off to their bruiser in Bo Jackson or some other play. And here on 4th-and-1, instead of trying to convert, maintain possession, score a touchdown that probably would have been the decider for Ohio State, Ryan Day elects to try to tie the game with a 27-yarder from Jaden Fielding, who yanked it with a duck hook wide left. Indiana survives. Indiana wins the football game, but not without capitalizing on crucial plays. Indiana made the play when it was necessary to at least extend a new set of downs, because on that ensuing drive for IU, 3rd-and-6 from their own 24-yard line, a gutsy call from Cignetti and his OC Mike Shanahan. They threw the football. Ohio State only had 1 timeout left as clock was ticking down, under 2:45 remaining. With 2:40, they snap it. Mendoza along the right sideline to Charlie Becker, who goes up to make a great grab. A 33-yard completion that iced away the game for a first down. 3rd-and-6 from their own 24 to have the stones to call a pass when Ohio State still had 1 more timeout to burn. But executing on that ballsy decision, that is what paid it off for the Hoosiers. Ohio State had to use their final timeout. They would get the football back, but deep in their own territory, really never had a chance. We talked about how crucial the red zone would be. The Buckeyes had 2 red zone trips in the second half. Not only did they not convert with touchdowns, they came away with 0 points on both of those red zone trips that got inside the Hoosiers' 10-yard line. That's how Indiana won its first Big Ten championship outright since the end of World War II in 1945. What Curt Cignetti has done in Bloomington will never be replicated. Frankly, I don't understand how it could. There has been some calls for the greatest turnaround in the history of college sports, the greatest turnaround in coaching job maybe in the history of sports in general, in college football. Bill Snyder at Kansas State gets a lot of the acclaim as well. The field is named after him. One day the field or a statue outside of the Rock will be built for Curt Cignetti. But it's very clear to me that Indiana, as the feel-good story, completely wiping out its history as the losingest program in FBS college football to win 11 games. But when stepping up in class, they got throttled by Ohio State and Notre Dame. The feel-good aha aberration moment for Indiana last year has completely flipped around this year. The Hoosiers are not just a feel-good story or the greatest turnaround in sports. They are legitimately the best team in college football. And you are living in a time where Indiana football is the best team in the sport, in my estimation, with the best chance of winning a national championship. IU is the real deal in so many ways. Fernando Mendoza, now a minus 3,000 favorite next Saturday night to win the Heisman Trophy in New York City. I believe that he will. He will become the first Hoosier in history. More accolades for IU to win the Heisman Trophy. They have not had anybody finish inside the top 3 in quite some time, dating back to Anthony Thompson in 1987, who finished runner-up. I believe I got my dates correct. All right, this show going a little bit longer than I intended it to, but to think about what Curt Cignetti has meant for Indiana, for Big Ten football, to think about what he has accomplished in Bloomington, truly is hard to kind of find the words to rationalize or explain it all. I am not sure there are words invented in the dictionary, except for remarkable, historic, achievement, whatever you want to use. What Curt Cignetti has done with the brazen belief in himself, overlooked often, incredibly self-confident, Google me, I win. To make those statements is one thing. To back them up immediately is another. And he has delivered on every what seemed like at the time outlandish, but no longer is promise. that he brought to Bloomington, Indiana. It should be celebrated. So with all of the craziness and chaos we are seeing right now, at the end of the college football playoff bracket reveal, what it means for bowl season, the politics and the ego stroking that happens daily in this sport of college football that decides the landscape in the future of collegiate athletics as a whole. There are still some bright spots, and there are still some wonderful stories to tell. Indiana football under Curt Cignetti in the last 2 seasons, certainly the embodiment of that. All right, now let's go around the Big Ten Conference because the bowl designations are out for the other teams that are going to be playing in bowl games. These 3 in the college football playoff: bowl eligible, 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 and bowl eligible. Also, bowl eligible. So let's talk about those spots for the others. Washington, first up in Big Ten bowling action Saturday night this upcoming week in Los Angeles against Boise State. Really good game coming up at the Bucked Up LA Bowl. I believe it's presented by Rob Gronkowski. It's crazy. It's this Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern time on December 13th. Next up, then we go to the day following Christmas. Northwestern and Central Michigan in what used to be called the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. It's now called the Game Above, or maybe it was something before that, Rocket Mortgage Bowl in Detroit. The Game Above Sports Bowl played inside Ford Field. Northwestern and CMU, a matchup of Big Ten versus MAC opponents. Later that day, New Mexico, 9-win New Mexico. The Lobos under Jason Eck, a great story this year, taking on Minnesota at Chase Field, the home of the D-backs in Phoenix in the Rate Bowl. Those games, 1 p.m. Eastern time for the Cats and the Chips, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time for the Gophers and the Lobos on the day following Christmas, December 26th. Minnesota has the longest active bowl win streak in FBS college football, 8 consecutive. They'll look for 9 straight under PJ Fleck. The day after that, in the Bronx, in Yankee Stadium, in the Pinstripe Bowl. How about this for a matchup? One we could not have ever dreamed, or perhaps it would have been a nightmare, anticipated prior to the season. The preseason number 2 team in the country will face the preseason number 4 team in the country. Penn State and Clemson in the Pinstripe Bowl on Saturday, December 27th, noon Eastern time. A few days later, as the calendar year 2025 comes to a close, we've got 2 more Big Ten bowl games on December 30th. A really good one between 2 8-win teams, Illinois and Tennessee, in the Music City Bowl. That's 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. And also on December 30th, it is USC and TCU in the Alamo Bowl at 9 p.m. Eastern. Really good game. I expect a lot out of Lincoln Riley. It is always the Alamo Bowl bump. I think the Trojans capitalize on that. And a great slate of games on New Year's Eve for the Big Ten Conference. 3 bowl games and a college football playoff quarterfinal as well. The first, the ReliaQuest Bowl in Tampa, Iowa and Vandy, a top 25 matchup. We'll see about availability, but I would expect 2 very veteran quarterbacks in Vandy's Diego Pavia and Iowa's Mark Gronowski to line up and play in that game. Noon Eastern time at Raymond James in Tampa. Vandy, Iowa, maybe the game on paper I am most excited for in the bowl season. If it's not that one, it's the next one. Michigan and Texas, 2 of the biggest brands and premier programs in the sport in the Citrus Bowl at 3 p.m. Eastern time in Orlando, followed by Nebraska and Utah in the Las Vegas Bowl at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. The Wolverines and the Longhorns, the Utes and the Huskers, basically the entrees, as is Iowa and Vandy on New Year's Eve. For our first college football playoff quarterfinal in the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State will take on either Texas A&M or Miami. What a great slate of games we've got for the Big Ten in bowl games. This is the opportunity, although some will diminish it with opt-outs and such and blame the insignificance of bowl games. It's an opportunity for a conference like the Big Ten to have success against other leagues, especially against other Power 4 conferences, and most notably against the SEC. There will be some opportunities in there for the Big Ten to make statements. Illinois, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Iowa, Indiana versus either Oklahoma or Alabama, potentially Ohio State against Texas A&M in the Cotton Bowl. Other news around the conference, late on Sunday, Nebraska has hired a new defensive coordinator. Rob Orich the DC this past year at San Diego State, takes the reins now in Lincoln. San Diego State, a top 10 scoring and total defense this year. Last year, they were 97th in scoring. Orich was on the staff in San Diego for the Aztecs, but just the defensive ends coach. This year promoted to defensive coordinator and took San Diego State to very high highs. I think there are only 3 teams during the 2025 FBS college football season, or only 2 teams, to pitch 3 shutouts. I think it was Ohio State and San Diego State. The Aztecs defense was awesome. And Nebraska has made some moves along that coaching staff. They got rid of John Butler. They fired Donovan Raiola, the offensive line coach, over the weekend. They have already added Jeep Wade from Georgia Tech, a ferocious and physical rushing attack, and now Rob Orich to take over the defensive reins from San Diego State. Critical hires in a critical offseason entering year 4 for Matt Rhule. Speaking of Matts, in State College, Pennsylvania, the big news on Friday, I hope after you listened or watched Big Ten Breakdown, it became official. It became finalized. Penn State has hired Iowa State's Matt Campbell, a guy in a decade in Ames who accomplished more with the Cyclones football program than basically anybody could ever see. I've got the Matt Campbell file here as I look at it, just to read off some of these accomplishments. A 72-55 overall record in 10 seasons with Iowa State, winning as head coach in Iowa State history, led Iowa State last year in 2024 to an 11-3 record, a berth in the Big 12 championship game, a Pop-Tarts Bowl victory as well. That was the only 10-win season in the history of Iowa State football. 8 of the 9 winning conference years in the Big 12, including this season, belonged to Matt Campbell. Iowa State joined the Big 12. The full Big 12 has been the case since 1996. So 8 of the 9 winning seasons under Matt Campbell in the last 10 years for a program that's been in that league for 30. He is the only head coach in Iowa State history with 5 consecutive winning seasons, 2017 through 2021. He has meant more to that program in Ames, as we saw from AD Jamie Pollard in Ames on Friday night when this news became official. I believe Matt Campbell will have success in State College, but he's got a lot of work to do to revamp that roster, to hit the recruiting trails, probably bring in some talent over from Iowa State in the transfer portal. One great move that Matt Campbell has already made, the retention of Terry Smith. Terry Smith becoming reportedly the highest paid non-coordinator in college football to remain in State College. I think that's really beneficial. And I think it speaks a lot to the character that Terry Smith has as an individual and what Penn State means to him and his family. I know that Terry Smith wanted to be the head coach of Penn State football. His players, both present and former, campaigned for that to be the case. Reportedly, there were many big donors for the Nittany Lions football program that said, hey, if you don't make Terry Smith the guy, there's going to be ramifications, Pat Kraft. So to keep Terry Smith in that program is a blessing. I do not believe it is a power struggle between Matt Campbell and Terry Smith, as he understands his place in that program and understands the power of Penn State football is far superior to either individual, Campbell, Smith, or those to come after them. Terry Smith has coached or played in State College for more than 15 years of his adult life. His father is a graduate of Penn State way back in the late 1960s. You understand the emotion and the significance of that place for Terry Smith. So to play a part in it moving forward, to get it back on track after a really disappointing 2025, I think speaks to who Terry Smith is, because he could have felt passed over for the job, look for something new, a change of pace, whatever you want to characterize it as, and decides to stay on Matt Campbell's new staff to welcome in this new era of Penn State football. That's really cool to me. Again, some special and significant things, despite at times people trying to tell you the landscape of this sport that we love so nearly and dearly in college football will never be the same, or schisms or dramatic ramifications that will change the entire outlook of this sport. I still think at times when everything feels a little bit heavy, at least in this sport, and I understand it's just in sports, when things feel a little bit heavy or a little bit dull on the horizon, the actual sport provides those unique moments. It is why I love it oh so much. All right. Plan on Big Ten Breakdown moving forward to incorporate some more Big Ten hoops as basketball season is underway. We'll talk a little bit more about basketball next week. We'll get you set with some college football playoff thoughts. All of that is going to come. We will solidify the schedule. There will be a Friday show this upcoming week. Without a ton of action in football, I'm not so sure it makes the most sense to do a Sunday recap for you to hear on Monday mornings with games being played on Sunday in basketball as well. There is more than likely going to be a midweek show releasing on Tuesday or Wednesday morning. We will still be twice a week, I should say. A Friday preview show of whatever we have in store, a mix of Big Ten basketball and, of course, bowl games and college football playoff games moving forward in the Big Ten Conference. And more than likely, I do not believe it will start until next week, a Tuesday morning show that kind of resets where things are across this conference and, of course, talking some Big Ten basketball as well. That will be the plan on Big Ten Breakdown. Any changes, of course, you will know, all a part here of the I-80 Club. A lot to get to today. I hope you enjoyed it all. Genuine reaction to where this conference is entering the college football playoff and bowl season. Thanks for being here, as always, on Big Ten Breakdown. I'm Ben Stevens.